Hello, my name is Emily Harper. I used to be just like any other flight attendant, smiling through the turbulence, serving drinks at 30,000 feet, and dreaming of a life beyond the endless layovers. But that all changed on Flight 666, the red-eye from New York to Los Angeles that the airline insisted on running despite the whispers among the crew. You see, I'd been with AeroStar for 8 years, pouring my soul into a job that chewed me up and spat me out. The harassment from the pilots, the unpaid overtime, the way management covered up incidents to protect their bottom line, it built up like pressure in a faulty oxygen mask. And then, one fateful night, I disappeared. Or at least, that's what they told the world. Emily Harper had always dreamed of the skies. From the moment she was a little girl in a sleepy Midwestern town, staring up at the contrails streaking across the vast blue expanse, she knew her life was meant to be up there, among the clouds. It wasn't just the glamour of travel or the allure of far-off destinations, it was the freedom, the escape from the mundane grind of her family's farm life. So, when she turned 18, she packed her bags, enrolled in flight attendant training, and never looked back. AeroStar Airlines hired her right out of school, dazzled by her bright smile, quick wit, and unyielding enthusiasm. For the first few years, it was everything she imagined, jetting from New York to Paris, serving champagne to celebrities, and collecting stories from passengers that made her feel like she was living a dozen lives at once. But the shine wore off quickly, like the cheap polish on the airline's fleet. AeroStar was a budget carrier masquerading as premium, cutting corners wherever they could. Emily started noticing the little things: outdated safety equipment, overbooked flights that left crew exhausted, and schedules that had them working 16-hour days with barely enough rest to function. She pushed through, though, because she loved the job. Her dedication shone through in her performance reviews, always exceeds expectations, always the one volunteering for the tough routes. Route 666, the overnight from New York to Los Angeles, became her regular haunt. It was grueling, with fussy passengers and red-eye fatigue, but Emily made it bearable with her charm, turning complaints into compliments and earning tips that helped pay off her student loans. Then came the mistreatment. It started subtly, with pilot Jameson. He was a veteran flyer with a reputation for being handsy, his jokes laced with innuendo that made the female crew squirm. Emily brushed off the first few comments, "You look good in that uniform, sweetheart," telling herself it was just the old-school mentality. But one night, during a layover in Vegas, he cornered her in the hotel bar, his breath reeking of whiskey as he grabbed her arm a little too tightly. "Come on, Em, loosen up. We're all family here." She pulled away, reported it to HR the next day, but nothing happened. Jameson got a slap on the wrist, a sensitivity training email, and was back in the cockpit the following week, smirking at her during pre-flight briefings. That was just the beginning. Management piled on. When Emily raised concerns about faulty cabin lighting on several planes, lights that flickered ominously during turbulence, potentially panicking passengers, her supervisor, Miss Klein, dismissed it as minor glitches. "We can't ground planes over every little complaint," Klein snapped, her eyes cold behind wire-rimmed glasses. Emily persisted, gathering reports from other crew members, but her emails went unanswered. Instead, she found herself assigned to more grueling shifts, her request for time off denied. Whispers circulated. She was trouble, a complainer. Promotions passed her by, given to less experienced attendants who knew how to keep their mouths shut. The injustice deepened when a passenger incident went wrong. On a stormy Flight 666, a man and coach had a medical emergency, chest pains, and gasped for air. Emily administered oxygen, called for a doctor on board, but the defibrillator malfunctioned. Its battery was dead, despite regulations requiring checks. The man survived, barely, after an emergency landing, but AeroStar buried the report. They blamed Emily for improper procedure, docking her pay and threatening suspension if she spoke out. She knew the truth. The equipment hadn't been serviced in months to save costs. Her resentment simmered, a slow burn that kept her awake during layovers, staring at hotel ceilings, replaying the what-ifs. Friends noticed the change. "You're not yourself, Em," her roommate Sarah said one night over takeout in their cramped Queens apartment. Sarah was another attendant, but she'd learned to play the game, flirting with pilots for better routes. Emily couldn't do that. Her integrity was all she had left. "They're grinding us down," Emily replied, her voice edged with bitterness, "and no one cares." She started documenting everything: emails, logs, and even secret recordings of meetings where management laughed off safety concerns. It became an obsession, her phone filled with evidence that could topple the airline if it ever saw the light of day. But the breaking point came with the harassment escalation. Jameson didn't stop. On another flight, he trapped her in the forward galley, his hand brushing her thigh under the guise of reaching for coffee. "You report me again, and you'll be blacklisted," he whispered, his face inches from hers. "No airline will touch you." Terror gripped her, but so did rage. She shoved him away, her heart pounding like the engines outside. That night, alone in her hotel room, she cried for the first time in years, the dream turning into a nightmare. The airline she once loved had become a monster, devouring her spirit piece by piece. Emily's resentment grew like a storm cloud, dark and unavoidable. She fantasized about quitting, but the job was her life, her identity. Instead, she plotted in silence, her smiles faker, her service mechanical. Passengers still adored her, oblivious to the turmoil beneath. But inside, the pressure built, a ticking bomb at 30,000 feet. Little did she know, on that next flight, 666, it would all erupt in ways no one could predict: her disappearance, the spark that would ignite a haunting revenge. The skies, once her sanctuary, were about to become her eternal domain. The night of Emily's disappearance was like any other on Flight 666, or at least it started that way. The Boeing 737 taxied down the runway at JFK under a moonless sky, the kind of inky blackness that swallowed the city lights below as soon as they lifted off. Emily moved through her pre-flight routine with mechanical precision, checking seat belts, demonstrating the safety video with a practiced smile, and stowing her own doubts in the overhead bin. The cabin was half full, a mix of bleary-eyed business travelers tapping away on laptops and families dozing under thin blankets. The air hummed with the familiar drone of engines, a white noise that usually lulled her into a state of autopilot. But tonight, something felt off, a prickling at the back of her neck, like static electricity building before a storm. As the plane leveled off at cruising altitude, somewhere over Pennsylvania, Emily headed to the rear galley to prepare the beverage cart. The overhead lights cast long shadows down the aisle, and the few awake passengers barely glanced up from their screens. She poured herself a cup of coffee, black and bitter, to shake off the fatigue from back-to-back shifts. That's when the first anomaly hit, a faint flicker in the cabin lights, not enough to alarm anyone, but enough to make her pause. She chalked it up to the aging wiring she complained about before, the same issues management had ignored. Shaking her head, she pushed the cart forward, offering drinks with her usual cheer. "Coffee, tea, or me?" She joked to a young couple, eliciting a tired laugh. Midway through service, as she reached row 23, the pull began. It started as a subtle tug, like an invisible thread yanking at her uniform. She glanced around, but everything seemed normal. The hum of conversation, the rattle of ice in plastic cups. Yet the air grew heavier, thicker, as if the pressurization was failing. Her ears popped, and a chill seeped through the vents, raising goosebumps on her arms. "Excuse me," she murmured to a passenger stepping into the aisle toward the rear. The lavatory light was on, occupied, but no one had passed her. Odd, she thought, but flights were full of quirks. In the galley, the sensation intensified. The metal counters felt unnaturally cold under her fingers, and the coffee pot she'd left steaming was now lukewarm. She reached for the intercom to check in with the cockpit, standard procedure for anything unusual, but her hand froze midway. A whisper slithered through the air, not from the speakers, but from everywhere and nowhere, her name, Emily, drawn out like a sigh. She spun around, heart racing, but the galley was empty. The plane dipped slightly, a pocket of turbulence, and she steadied herself against the wall. "Get a grip," she muttered, attributing it to exhaustion. But the whisper came again, louder, echoing with a familiarity that sent ice down her spine. Panic rising, she hurried back to the cabin, but the aisle seemed longer, the rows stretching endlessly. Passengers slept on, oblivious, their faces pale in the dim glow. She made it to the forward galley, where Sarah was chatting with the co-pilot over headsets. "Did you hear that?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sarah frowned. "Hear what? You okay, Em? You look like you've seen a ghost." Emily forced a laugh, but it died in her throat as the lights flickered again, this time plunging the cabin into momentary darkness. Gasps rippled through the passengers, and the seatbelt sign chimed on. The pilots announced minor turbulence, urging everyone to stay seated. Emily complied, strapping into her jump seat, but the pull returned, stronger, insistent, drawing her toward the rear once more. Against better judgment, she unbuckled and crept back, the plane's vibrations masking her footsteps. In the tail section, near the emergency exit, the air was frigid, her breath visible in puffs. She peered into the tiny mirror above the sink, and for a split second, her reflection warped, eyes hollow, skin ashen, like a corpse staring back. Terror clamped her chest. She backed away, fumbling for the door, but it wouldn't budge. The whisper evolved into a roar, words tumbling over each other. Justice, fall, disappear. Then, nothing. The plane steadied, lights stabilized, and the cabin returned to its monotonous hum. Sarah called out for her during the descent, but Emily was nowhere to be found. They searched every inch upon landing at LAX, the aisles, galleys, lavatories, and even the cargo hold below. Passengers were questioned. Did you see the attendant with the brown hair? Hear anything unusual? A few mentioned whispers or chills, but most shrugged it off as flight jitters. The cockpit voice recorder captured nothing out of the ordinary, just routine chatter. Ground crew tore apart the luggage compartments, but no trace, no body, no note, no sign of struggle. The investigation ignited like a flare in the night. FAA officials swarmed the airport, poring over manifests and security footage. Emily's last known position was time-stamped on the in-flight system at 2:47 a.m., logging a galley access. After that void, theories swirled. Suicide, perhaps jumping from the plane midair, but at 35,000 feet over rural terrain, no wreckage or body was found despite helicopter searches. Foul play? Jameson was grilled. His alibi was the cockpit, but alibis held. Some whispered about a breakdown. Emily snapping under pressure and hiding somewhere on board, impossible given the thorough sweeps. AeroStar's paranoia skyrocketed. Whispers among the crew turned to outright fear. No one wanted the 666 route. Management issued statements, tragic accident, thoughts with the family, while burying deeper probes. Harlan, the CEO, paced his office, barking orders to contain the PR nightmare. Media hounded them, headlines screaming vanished in the sky, cabin crew mystery, and stock prices dipped. Emily's apartment was searched, her phone records pulled, revealing those damning emails and recordings, but they painted her as unstable, a narrative the airline pushed to deflect blame. Yet, clues evaded them. No suicide note, no history of mental illness beyond work stress. Her family, parents back in the Midwest, a brother in Chicago, demanded answers, hiring private investigators who hit dead ends. The airline offered a reward, but the leads fizzled. As weeks turned to months, the case went cold, filed under unsolved aviation mysteries. But the paranoia lingered, a shadow over every flight. Crews reported oddities, empty seats feeling occupied, whispers in the wind. Emily was gone, but her presence or absence haunted AeroStar, a void that promised to swallow them whole. The skies held their secret, and the airline's unease was just the beginning of the storm to come. The weeks following Emily's disappearance were a blur of forced normalcy for AeroStar. Flight 666 resumed its schedule, the airline eager to bury the incident under layers of bureaucracy and PR spin. The first post-disappearance flight took off under a veil of unease, the crew exchanging nervous glances during the briefing. Sarah, now lead attendant, tried to rally them with pep talks, but her voice cracked on Emily's name, mentioned only in passing as the recent tragedy. The passengers boarded oblivious, settling in for the red-eye. But the air felt charged, like the cabin pressure was off by a fraction that only the seasoned staff could sense. It began subtly, almost dismissible. Midway over the Midwest, as the lights dimmed for sleep mode, a faint whisper slithered through the intercom. Static at first, then resolving into a soft, feminine murmur. Help. Me. The co-pilot checked the system, blaming it on interference from a passing storm cell. Passengers stirred, a few adjusting their earbuds, assuming it was part of an announcement. But Sarah froze in the forward galley, her skin prickling. It sounded like Emily, that same lilting tone she'd used to calm crying babies. She shook it off, attributing it to grief, and continued her rounds. Then the lights flickered. Not the usual dip from power surges, but a rhythmic pulse like Morse code tapping out a message in the gloom. Aisle lights winked on and off, casting eerie shadows that danced across sleeping faces. One passenger, an elderly woman in 14 amperes, bolted upright, clutching her armrest. Did you see that? She whispered to her neighbor. A figure. At the back. The man grumbled about dreams and rolled over, but Sarah investigated, finding nothing but an empty rear galley. The coffee pot was overturned, though. spilling dark liquid that formed irregular patterns on the floor, patterns that if you squinted resembled a face in agony. The unexplained turbulence hit next. Not the bumpy kind from weather reports, but sharp, deliberate jolts that felt like the plane was being shoved by giant, invisible hands. The pilots fought the controls, announcing a bit of chop over the PA, but their voices held an edge of confusion. No radar showed storms ahead. Seatbelts strained as bodies lurched, drinks spilling, laptops sliding. In the chaos, a child screamed, pointing to the window. "There's someone outside!" Crew dismissed it as imagination, but later, reviewing the flight data, anomalies appeared. Sudden altitude drops of mere feet, unexplained and untraceable. These occurrences spread like a virus through subsequent flights. On the next 666, whispers evolved. Names called out in the dead of night. Sarah, echoed from an unoccupied lavatory, drawing her inside where the mirror fogged up despite the dry air, a finger tracing Y in the condensation before her eyes. She emerged pale, refusing to discuss it, but word got around. Passengers reported cold spots, patches of freezing air in the aisles that made breath visible, chilling bones even under blankets. One businessman swore his tray table lifted on its own, contents rattling as if in protest. The targeting grew personal. Jameson, the pilot with the wandering hands, experienced the worst. During the cruise, his instrument panel glitched, gauges spinning wildly before settling on readings that spelled out guilty in digital flickers. He laughed it off in the cockpit, but sweat beaded on his forehead, his hands shaky on the yoke. Turbulence struck hardest near him, the plane bucking like a wild animal sensing fear. Crew members who'd ignored Emily's complaints found their jump seats creaking under phantom weight, as if someone sat beside them breathing softly in their ear. Passengers weren't spared. A family and coach felt tugs on their sleeves, invisible fingers pulling at clothing. Electronics malfunctioned, phones playing garbled audio of a woman's voice pleading, "Listen, please," before batteries drained inexplicably. The atmosphere thickened with dread. Laughter died out, replaced by hushed conversations about that missing girl. Online forums buzzed with passenger reviews. Felt like a horror movie. Won't fly. AeroStar again. Bookings dipped, but the airline plowed on, attributing issues to technical gremlins and memos that urged staff to stay silent. As nights blurred into a pattern, the hauntings built a palpable terror. Whispers turned choral, multiple voices overlapping in the cabin hum. Lights didn't just flicker, they dimmed to near blackout. Emergency strips glowing like veins in the dark. Turbulence evolved into rhythmic shakes, syncing with heartbeats, making some passengers clutch their chests in panic. Sarah, on her third post-Emily flight, broke down in the galley sobbing to a colleague. "It's her. She's angry." We let her down. The airline's paranoia deepened. Mandatory psyche evals were introduced, but they only fueled rumors of a curse. Crew turnover spiked, attendants calling in sick, and pilots requesting transfers. Yet the flights continued, each one ratcheting the dread. In the quiet moments between jolts and whispers, you'd catch a scent, Emily's perfume, faint and floral, wafting through the vents. It was a reminder that the skies held grudges, and AeroStar's night route was no longer just a path. It was a gauntlet, haunted by the echo of one woman's unresolved fury. The initial signs were harbingers, subtle threads weaving into a web of terror that would soon ensnare them all. The hauntings on Route 666 had been a warning, a low growl from the dark. By the end of the second month, they were a war. It started with the schedules. Every crew roster for 666 arrived with a single line missing. The name of the flight attendant who should have been in the rear galley. Printers spat out the manifest. And the slot for position 4R was blank, as if the system itself refused to acknowledge the vacancy. Ground staff in New York and Los Angeles began leaving that jump seat empty, stacking blankets there like a shrine. They told themselves it was superstition. They were wrong. The first mechanical failure was surgical. Flight 666 Alpha, 3 weeks after Emily vanished, lost cabin pressure at 31,000 feet over Nebraska. The mask dropped, oxygen hissing like serpents. The pilots executed a rapid descent, but the leak sealed itself the moment they reached 10,000 feet. No puncture, no cracked seal, nothing for the maintenance log except a cryptic note. Self-resolved. The FAA demanded that the aircraft be grounded for inspection. The inspection found pristine seals and a single fingerprint on the inner wall of the pressure bulkhead, Emily's, lifted in perfect detail. though her personnel file listed her prints as unrecoverable after the disappearance. 2 nights later, 666 Bravo suffered a dual hydraulic failure. The plane yawed violently, coffee scalding passengers as the yoke fought the pilots. In the cockpit voice recorder, amid the alarms and clipped commands, a woman's voice, calm, almost conversational, cut through. "You ignored the warnings." The black box captured the exact moment the systems rebooted without input. The aircraft landed safely, but the pilots quit on the spot. One was found in the crew hotel at 3 a.m., staring at the bathroom mirror, repeating, "She's in the wires." Emily's sabotage became a language only the guilty could read. The manager who had buried Emily's harassment report, Miss Klein, received an email from her own account at 2:47 a.m., the precise minute Emily had last been logged on the manifest. Subject line, your silence. The body was a single attachment, a video file. Klein clicked it in her high-rise office overlooking Manhattan. The footage was a security cam from the employee parking garage, time-stamped the night Emily disappeared. It showed Klein herself deleting Emily's complaint from the HR server, then laughing with Jameson over takeout. The video ended with the camera zooming in on Klein's reflection in the monitor, except the reflection smiled while the real Klein screamed. The file corrupted the moment she tried to forward it. Every copy she made turned to static. Pilots who had flown with Emily began dreaming the same dream. They were at the controls, but the windshield was a mirror. Emily sat in the co-pilot seat, uniform immaculate, eyes black voids. She never spoke, she simply reached for the yoke. They woke gasping, hands frozen in the shape of gripping controls. 3 requested indefinite leave within a week. The airline tried to fight back. They renamed the route 667, then 700, then simply NYC lacks red eye. The hauntings followed the aircraft tail number, not the designation. N407AS, the plane Emily had vanished from, became a pariah. No crew would bid for it. AeroStar parked it in the desert boneyard outside Tucson, surrounded by chain link and floodlights. Satellite photos later show the aircraft's shadow at night cast the silhouette of a woman standing in the aisle, arms outstretched. Passengers became collateral. A tech CEO live streaming from first class had his feed hijacked mid-sentence. The screen filled with Emily's face, pale, eyes bleeding, static, whispering coordinates over the Rockies where, decades earlier, an AeroStar maintenance crew had dumped faulty parts to avoid fines. The stream cut to black. The coordinates were real. The wreckage was recovered the next day, complete with serial numbers matching company logs. Stock plunged 14% before the opening bell. Delays turned weaponized. Gates froze at exactly 11:11 p.m. local time. Boarding bridges retracted on their own. Fuel trucks arrived with tanks mysteriously empty. One night, every digital display in Terminal 7 at JFK cycled through the same message in Emily's handwriting, projected in flickering green. "The sky remembers." SAW shut the terminal for 6 hours. The message vanished without a trace, but the footage went viral. The visions escalated. A flight attendant named Patel, who had testified that Emily seemed fine to investigators, opened an overhead bin to find it packed with ice, hundreds of pounds, impossible at altitude. The ice formed a perfect mold of Emily's body, limbs curled fetal, mouth open in a silent scream. The mold melted in minutes, flooding the aisle ankle deep before the drains could handle it. Patel was hospitalized for hypothermia. The water tested pure, with trace amounts of the floral perfume Emily wore. Jameson broke first. He was dead heading on a daylight flight, any flight, to avoid 666. Over Utah, the cabin filled with the smell of ozone, his seatbelt unbuckled itself. The overhead bin above him opened, and a single oxygen mask descended, swaying like a pendulum. The mask cup was smeared with lipstick, the exact shade Emily had favored. Jameson clawed his way to the cockpit, pounding on the door until the captain let him in. He babbled about, hands under his seat, fingers like ice prying at his knees. The plane diverted to Salt Lake City. Jameson was sedated. In the ambulance, he whispered to the paramedic, "She's counting. Every lie, every touch, she's almost done." By the 4th month, AeroStar was hemorrhaging. Cancellations hit 40%. Insurance premiums tripled. The board convened an emergency session in a windowless room at headquarters. Harlan, the CEO, demanded exorcists, psychics, anything. A priest boarded N407AS in the desert, sprinkling holy water along the fuselage. The water froze mid-air, forming crystals that spelled "too late" before shattering. The priest left the same day. Refusing payment? Emily's final salvo before the climax was poetic. Every screen on every AeroStar plane, gate monitors, seat back displays, cockpit MFDs, displayed the same image at 30,000 feet. Emily's personnel file, page by page. Performance reviews, harassment complaints, the buried medical incident, the doctored defibrillator log. Passengers filmed it on their phones. The files uploaded themselves to cloud servers the airline didn't own. By the time IT pulled the plug, the documents were mirrored on 1,000 sites. The hashtag number cabin crew 666 trended worldwide. The airline was a corpse still twitching. Crews walked off en masse. Planes sat idle. Harlan received a single text from a blocked number. One more flight. He knew which one. He booked himself on the last schedule 666, bringing a priest, a medium, and a lawyer clutching liability waivers. The manifest listed 147 passengers, but when the door closed, the system registered 148 souls on board. Emily was waiting. The final flight, 666, was not listed on any public board. AeroStar had canceled the route weeks earlier, but N407AS, the ghost plane itself, rolled out of the Tucson boneyard under cover of darkness, towed by a single tug whose driver later swore the yoke inside the cockpit turned itself to guide them. The manifest was sealed, the passenger list encrypted, and the only announcement came via a single email from Harlan's personal account. Board at Hangar 19, no questions, no phones. 147 names were printed. 148 seats were occupied. The crew arrived first, summoned by emergency recall. Sarah, hollow-eyed and chain-smoking, wore the lead attendant stripe she had never wanted. Two pilots who had never flown 666 before, new hires, expendable, sat rigid in the cockpit, their pre-flight checklist annotated with a single handwritten line in red ink. She is already on board. The priest, Father Ruiz, clutched a leather satchel of relics and a flask of holy water that had begun to boil the moment he crossed the jet bridge. The medium, a rail-thin woman named Delphine, kept her eyes closed, lips moving in a language no one recognized. Harlan boarded last, flanked by a corporate lawyer whose briefcase rattled as if something inside were trying to escape. The door sealed with a hiss that sounded like a sigh. Pushback began at 11:11 p.m. Mountain Time. The tug driver cut the engines and fled. From the tower, the plane taxied under its own power. Navigation lights strobing in perfect synchronization with the heartbeats of everyone on board. Clearance was never requested. Clearance was never needed. The runway lights dimmed as N407AS thundered into the desert sky, climbing through a moonless void that swallowed the stars. Inside, the cabin lights refused to brighten past a sickly amber. Seatback screens flickered to life on their own, displaying a single frame. Emily Harper's crew badge photo, the one taken 8 years earlier, smiling like the world still belonged to her. The image dissolved into static, then reformed as live feed from the forward galley camera, except the galley was empty, and the timestamp read 2:47 a.m., the exact minute of her disappearance. Harlan took the first-class jump seat, knuckles white on the armrests. Father Ruiz began the rite of exorcism in Latin, his voice trembling. Delphine stood in the aisle, arms spread, whispering, "She's not angry anymore. She's precise." The lawyer opened his briefcase. Inside lay Emily's original harassment file, pages bleeding fresh ink that spelled new accusations in handwriting no living person could replicate. Turbulence struck without warning, but it was not random. The aircraft banked hard left, then right, tracing the outline of a noose in the sky. Oxygen masks deployed in perfect rows, cups smeared with the same crimson lipstick. The intercom crackled, and Emily's voice, calm, almost maternal, filled every speaker, every headset, every skull. "Seatbelts, please. We're beginning our descent into truth." The cockpit door locked itself. The pilot's controls went slack. On the multifunction display, a new waypoint appeared. Justice, coordinates 40.7128 degrees north, 74.0060 degrees west, ground zero of AeroStar's headquarters rooftop helipad in Manhattan, 2,400 miles away. The autopilot engaged, throttling up to Mach 0.92. A speed the 737 was never certified to sustain. In the cabin, the haunting became confession. Sarah found herself strapped into the rear jump seat, facing an apparition that was both Emily and not Emily. Uniform pristine, name tag polished, but skin translucent, veins glowing like fiber optic cables under moonlight. The ghost placed a hand on Sarah's cheek, ice that burned. "You said nothing," Emily whispered. "Now say everything." Sarah's mouth opened against her will. Words poured out. Every time she had laughed off Jameson's groping, every shift she had volunteered for to avoid Emily's complaints, every lie to investigators. Her confession broadcast over the PA, looping in surround sound, passengers clutching ears as the truth flayed them. Father Ruiz's rosary snapped bead by bead, each pearl striking the floor and bursting into flame that left no scorch. He switched to English, pleading, "Absolve them, child, they are frail." Emily materialized before him, head tilted. Absolution is earned in the fall. The priest's Bible opened itself to the book of Job, pages tearing free to swirl like white birds before igniting midair. Delphine, the medium, began to convulse. Her eyes rolled white, and when she spoke, two voices overlapped, hers and Emily's. "The sky is not your kingdom, it is mine." She levitated 6 inches, shoes scraping the ceiling, then dropped. When she rose, her face was Emily's for a heartbeat, then her own again, weeping blood. Harlan tried to stand, but the seatbelt cinched tighter, cutting circulation. The bulkhead in front of him rippled like water, and Emily stepped through it as if the aluminum were mist. She carried no tray, no cart, only a single evidence bag, the kind used by NTSB crash investigators. Inside, the defibrillator battery from the flight where the passenger nearly died, still bearing the maintenance sticker Harlan had ordered forged. She pressed it to his chest. Electricity arced without a power source. Harlan convulsed, foam at the lips, and when the seizure passed, he was speaking in Emily's voice. Every memo, every payoff, every order to make the problem disappear. The lawyer's briefcase exploded open. Documents scattered, thousands of pages in possible volume, each detailing a cover-up, a falsified log, a silenced whistleblower. They plastered the cabin walls, ceiling, and floor until the interior resembled a paper tomb. Passengers screamed as the pages sliced skin like razors, drawing blood that spelled apologies in midair before evaporating. Outside the windows, the night sky fractured. Stars rearranged into the outline of Emily's face, continent size, watching. The aircraft shuddered, rivets groaning as if the fuselage itself were exhaling 8 years of rot. Then, silence. The plane leveled. The lights steadied. The autopilot disengaged with a soft chime. The pilots, pale, shaking, regained control. Below them, the lights of New York glittered like a circuit board. The waypoint Justice blinked once, then vanished. Emily stood at the front of the cabin, solid now, uniform pressed, hair tucked neatly behind her ears. She addressed them all, voice gentle but absolute. "You will land. You will walk off this plane. You will speak. Every secret, every lie, every life you traded for profit. The world will hear it from your mouths, not mine. Then, and only then, will Route 666 be grounded forever." She turned to Harlan, who was sobbing, urine staining his trousers. "Your empire ends at sunrise." The wheels touched down at JFK at 5:47 a.m., an hour before scheduled sunrise. The jet bridge attached itself, doors opened without crew input. Passengers stumbled out, some laughing hysterically, others catatonic. Reporters, tipped off by an anonymous email containing the flight's tail number, waited with cameras. Every soul on board spoke. Confessions poured live on morning news. Sarah's guilt, the pilot's complicity, Harlan's crimes. The lawyer handed over the briefcase, now empty, but for a single Polaroid. Emily waving from the cockpit, time-stamped minutes after landing. By noon, AeroStar's board resigned en masse. By dusk, the FAA revoked its operating certificate pending investigation. By midnight, N407AS was towed to a secure hangar, doors welded shut, tail number stricken from the registry. Satellite imagery later showed the aircraft's shadow on the tarmac, still the silhouette of a woman in the aisle, arms outstretched, but now at peace. Route 666 never flew again. The skies over the continental United States grew quieter, as if listening. And on certain clear nights, when the wind cut sharp across the runways of JFK, ground crew swear they hear a soft voice over the tower frequency, calm and professional. "Cabin crew, prepare for departure. This time, we land together." The signal fades before anyone can trace it. The logbooks remain blank. Emily Harper is listed as deceased, cause justice served. Years have passed since that final, unlisted flight touched down at dawn. AeroStar Airlines exists now only as a cautionary footnote in aviation textbooks, a case study in corporate hubris titled The Cost of Silence at Altitude. The headquarters in Manhattan was sold at auction, and the helipad on its roof was dismantled brick by brick. N407AS, the plane that carried 148 souls into reckoning, was cut into pieces and melted down. The scrap was used to reinforce runway thresholds at smaller regional airports, so that every takeoff and landing rolls over the ghost of what was. Harlan died in federal custody before trial, found in his cell with a bedsheet knotted in the shape of a seatbelt, the knot tied in perfect aviation-grade loops no guard could replicate. His last words, recorded by the inmate in the next bunk, were, "She's still counting." Sarah left the industry. She teaches middle school English in a town so small it has no airport. On windy nights, she wakes certain she hears the chime of a cabin call button. She keeps a single object from her old life. Emily's name bar, polished smooth by years of thumb, rubbing letters worn to faint silver ghosts. The FAA file on Flight 666 remains open, classified, unexplained, resolved. No further incidents, no whispers on the wind, no cold spots at 35,000 feet. The route itself was erased from every chart, its number retired like a cursed jersey. Pilots who once flew it refused to cross the continental United States at night. They reroute north over Canada or south over water, adding hours in fuel because the sky remembers. And Emily? She is gone, truly gone. The way a storm passes and leaves the air washed clean. Yet every year, on the anniversary of her disappearance, a single first-class boarding pass appears at gate 19 inches JFK. No name, no flight number, just a seat assignment, 1 ampere. Gate agents print it, stare at it, then watch it vanish from the system the moment they look away. No one boards, no one ever will. The skies are quieter now, safer some say. But on certain red-eye flights, any airline, any route, when the cabin lights dim and the engines settle into their cruising hymn, a passenger will glance up from a book or a screen and swear they see, for the briefest heartbeat, a woman in uniform walk in the aisle. She checks seat belts, adjusts a pillow, and offers a smile that needs no words. Then she is gone, leaving only the faint scent of gardenias and the soft click of a jump seat folding shut. The crew never reports it. They don't need to. They know the message is simple, delivered in the language of altitude and justice. I'm still here. Be better.